Whoa. Hello, everybody. Jennifer Christensen. We've got a very special mentor talk tonight. So hopefully you guys are joining us. It's going to be about a 15-second delay as we're doing this, as I'm experimenting and trying out some new programs so that we can get guest speakers onto our mentor talk. So if you are watching, if you would give me a hello on the comments, that would be great. And then I'll introduce our first speaker. So I just want to make sure that we are working and that you guys can hear and see me. So if you are watching, go ahead and say hello. Looks like we got 2 folks. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started. Got a few people watching. If it's really laggy, please let me know, as this is experimental. Excellent. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, so we're going to go get started. We're talking about traveling teachers and art on a cart tonight. And honestly, I was a traveling teacher for the first 9 years I taught. But we have someone who is an expert on art on the cart that's going to talk to you tonight, and that is Shannon Wadle from Great Bend. So we're going to switch over here, and you should be able to see Shannon now. Shannon, wave. Hey, Shannon, so you are in Great Bend, correct?
Yes.
And how long have you been a traveling art on the cart teacher?
25th year.
Awesome. What would you do in a classroom?
I wouldn't know what to do with myself. I've never had one. Even when I did my elementary student teaching, I was on a cart traveling. So the only time I've ever had a classroom was when I did my student teaching in high school. That was only for 8 weeks.
Wow. So folks, as Shannon's talking, she's going to have tons of information. She's super organized, and she's going to have answers for you since she's a pro at this. So I'm going to switch it over to her, and you guys can listen to hear what she's got to say. And it's up to you. You're all good.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to rattle through a bunch of stuff. If you have questions, please let me know. I'll try to answer them. Brief history of my experience on a cart here in Great Bend. When I started here in the district 25 years ago, we literally had shopping carts from buildings. And when they told me that at the job interview, they laughed when they said it, so I thought they were joking, but they were not. And so that's where I started out with, shopping cart. And the principal that was in charge of the art department at that time was trying to be helpful and spent all of our budget money for us, buying us a bunch of materials, most of which we wouldn't have ordered, but she was trying to be helpful. So we had very little money to get what we needed for basics. So I had one set of paints for all of the buildings. I was going to, I went to 7 buildings at that time. One set of pretty much everything. And I had to take all of that around with me wherever I went. And my whole back of my car, trunk and so forth was kind of a mini warehouse. So over the years, I was able to use budget money little by little to start building up supplies at the schools. Did a lot of campaigning with administration to start getting art rather than just the shopping carts. And over a period of time, we were able to get those. They could afford to get us carts for 2 buildings a year. And at that time, we were in 7 buildings. So it took us several years to get actual carts. But we have a much better setup now than starting out with. These are kind of our Cadillac carts. The 5 schools that I go to currently, we have these kind of carts at 4 of them. One of our schools has an elevator, and these are too big to go into the elevator. So we have a smaller cart at that building. And I've got some pictures of that cart that I will put in the comments after this to kind of show you how I did that. It is a cart that ordered from the company Pernicus. I believe we got from Lick or School Specialty for different things. And that one, because it's smaller, doesn't have nearly as much storage as this does. So I've put a lot of add-ons, things I could find at Walmart and so forth, with little shower caddies that I took the suction cups off of and wired to the side of the cart. I've got bungee cords everywhere holding everything on. But I've stuck pretty much everything I can possibly stick on that cart on there. When I'm traveling around, I've always had my art rules on my cart. I did it nice and skinny so it fits without being in too much of the way. The way that our schedule works is a little bit different than most people's schedule. We are at one school every day for a week, and then we go to the next school the next week. So we're on kind of a block schedule to make our way around. So when I'm packing stuff, I'm packing it for a week at a time, and I teach K6, so I've got 7 grade levels. So when I'm traveling from building to building, I've got a lot of junk that I take. This is just a table easel that we got. Is supposed to be for little kids drawing and so forth. It's actually smaller in terms of that wooden ground. It's a much smaller easel, as small as it is. But the front of it started getting really scratched up, and I finally got smart and bought a larger marker board, magnetic marker board, and just velcroed it on. And now I've got way more space than I used to have. I can put things up with magnets and each day. So this is not attached to the cart at all. It's just an add-on. All of these containers down here are Walmart specials. I just did a lot of measuring, went into the storage section with my tape measure and figured out what I could get to fit where, and to make the space work as efficiently as I could. I try to keep all of the supplies that kids have access to labeled, and they know exactly where everything goes, so it's easy for them to find it. And I keep it consistent between the carts so I can remember where I put it. This is my supply hospital. Anytime there's a supply that's online that isn't working, that can be markers fritzing out or whatever. The thing that gets stuck in here the most are clogged water bottles. Instead of the kids chasing me around the room, I just say, put it in here. If it's in here, then I know it needs to be fixed, and I'll deal with it later, and they know to automatically just put it here and go get a different blue bottle, and it's not a deal. Being on a cart, there are some limitations on materials. I try to expose the kids to as many different kinds of materials as I can. There's some things that just aren't feasible. I'm going into the teachers' classrooms, I'm invading their space, and all of the rooms that we go into are carpeted. So, for instance, I don't use India ink. My very first year teaching, my co-teacher decided to use India ink, and on the very first class that she did it, they spilled a bunch on the carpet that had been in the building for 3 months. And that did not go very well with administration or anything else, so I just don't touch it. I used to do paper mache with my 6th graders, and it just got to be way too big of a hassle. And I know it's something that they do at middle school, and so I just had to give it up. It takes up too much space. It was invading the classroom teacher space too much and getting a lot of people kind of gritty about everything. So I just had to sort of abandon that. There's just certain things that just are not feasible to do on a cart. I can't do a lot of centers. That can get into like printmaking and so forth. That can be kind of hard. I go to a lot of printmaking workshops and they make all these really cool centers, and hey, you just rotate around the room and do all this stuff. and I can't really do that. I can, most of the time in my classrooms, take up maybe one space, a reading table or something like that. But with only 40-minute class times, I have to be able to set it up, get the kids going, and tear it down and get out of the teacher's space within a really short period of time. So there's things like that that just aren't feasible. Paper making, that sort of thing, I just can't do it. But as far as painting and that sort of thing, absolutely, we do it all the time. When I started in the district, we did have a kiln at that time, and we did do clay, regular firing clay. It was a big challenge because we had so many buildings, so many students, and I had to haul that clay in my car to one location where the kiln was, and we had a lot of broken projects, just hitting bumps and so forth. When I started, there were little pieces of old flooring linoleum that had been left over from a former teacher, and that's what we used for the projects to keep their desks kind of cleared off. But it was kind of a logistical pain in the neck to try to do that with the kids. A few years into my tenure here, the district, unbeknownst to us, sold our kiln at an auction over the summer. And so that was the end of us using firing clay. So now we use mainly Model Magic. I've used some other air dry clay, but not as good of results. So the Model Magic, it is much more expensive than firing clay, but logistically it's a lot easier for us to do it. I'm not hauling things in my car, I'm not getting broken projects trying to put them back together. One advantage of working with Model Magic is that you can actually do color mixing and stuff with it, sort of switch things up from paint and so forth. So that's kind of where I'm at with some of those materials. As far as supplies on my cart, I do keep full sets of class set of glue, because they have taken that off of the school supply list for most of our grades, which is kind of frustrating. And then I have some extra supplies for students to use if they don't have anything. Being a traveling teacher and going into their classrooms, one of the issues that you have is not getting your supplies back, because they can put it in their desk or, that sort of thing. Whereas if I had a classroom and they were having to line up, it'd be a little bit easier to identify who's trying to sneak off the glue bottle. So what I do with my glue, I make these little faces on it, and like this one says dot dot a lot. This one says keep it clean. But I put these on my glue bottles, and then I know that mine, so if the kid does have a glue bottle, I know it's mine versus theirs.
Shannon, can we see a close-up of that glue?
Oh, sure.
Cool.
Just a very simple publisher document, nothing fancy. You could get really fancy, but I was kind of doing it under rush. This year I did something a little bit different with my other supplies. Usually I just write art across it, but it can be kind of hard to see my supplies versus theirs because it blends in. So this year I just printed off labels and stuck them on there. And so far so good, and it's a lot easier for me to identify when it's my supply versus theirs. It's not blending in on their desk like the other ones used to. And with my scissors, I spray paint the handles. Because none of the kids do that to their supplies, so I can only sell one. And so far so good. I've had a pretty good return on things. I'm not getting stuff walking away nearly as much as I used to. One of the hacks that I've learned, these are my sets of hand pencil sharpeners. I used to buy the Prismacolor ones, and the black ones are just as nice, and they're cheaper. I use these containers. I have 5 in there. Sometimes I have groups of 4, sometimes a group of 5, so I have 5 in all of them. And I have a magic tool, otherwise known as a paper clip. So when they fill up, I just have them empty it into the container. If it clogs, they can use the paper clip to get a lid out of it, and then they just seal it back up and turn it into me like this. They don't have to get out of their seats. No one's going over to the trash can, no clowning around. It's made using colored pencils and things. A lot simpler. I am the one that goes around and picks these up. I don't trust the kids. And I count and make sure that there's 5 when I get it back. And if there aren't 5, then everybody goes back to their seat and everybody opens up their desk, and we just keep doing this until it miraculously appears. And so I say, oh, I didn't know I put it in there. But I get all my stuff back. Let's see. I keep my basics that I use all the time on my cart. The big Sharpies, little Sharpies. I like to have the separate sizes. I know that they do have some that are double-ended where you put them in 2 and 1, but I like to be able to control which ones they're using. Some projects I'll let them use both. Sometimes I only want them to use a smaller Sharpie. Some I only want them to use a big one, so I do the separate ones so that I can control that. Rulers, all those basics. When I'm working with any kind of cut paper that I do with projects, I have become the queen of 2.5 gallon baggies. I love them, they're fabulous, and you can put anything in them. So I keep all my papers in those here, and I just label it. So this is my 2nd grade airplanes project that we're working on right now. All of the paper that is that size, which is 12 by 10 for that particular thing, is in here, and it's really easy for me to find it, and I keep it together. I do the same thing for my visuals. Like right now with 5th grade, we're doing a scarecrow project. So I've got packets that have different examples of different kinds of crops, different farm animals, barns, all different kinds of things that they can use with it. And I just keep those in baggies for each group. So each set goes to a group, and then I have all of them together in a set. And again, it's labeled 5th grade, so I know to grab the 5th grade one. And that's an easy way for me to keep track of everything. I have another big baggie that's just 6 by 9 paper, construction paper, lots of different colors. I keep on my cart so that if we're running low on something, I can just grab it and I have it with me. I do try to keep a little paper cutter on my cart. It comes in handy. Sometimes you think you have enough cut, anyone does not. So that comes in handy. I've got my stash of paper here. And what I do for paint papers, and a lot of people use newspaper, but what I do is construction paper, the big stuff. It is exactly the size of the top of their desk, which is the desk that we have in our district. So I don't have to deal with any overlapping. And it's a lot thicker than the newspaper. So when there's spills or anything like that, it doesn't soak through it. It absorbs it almost like a paper towel. It kind of helps with the cleanup, actually. It's really cheap. It's pretty durable. These I started off with a new set this year because my other ones I had for probably 2 or 3 years, and they finally were just so ragged that I pitched them all at the end of last year. But they actually do last a really long time. I just use them over and over and over again. And I always keep these stashed on my cart. Let's see. With construction paper, anytime I'm doing a collage project, I have a bunch of these baskets, and I get my paper. It's usually 6 by 9 unless there's a specific size. Lots of different colors, and just start with them in the basket. Each group gets a basket. All of their good scraps that can be reused go back in the basket. Little fragments stuff gets put in recycling, and I just stack my baskets up. I've got a little stash spot at the bottom of my cart where I can keep them, and I'll use them like that all year long. I can add certain colors at the end of the year, everything, and then put new in for the next year. But I've got a bunch of them. I've got 6 baskets for each cart. There's usually enough baskets to go around there. Let's see. I use tempera cakes, watercolors mainly. And it depends on the project, it depends on what we're doing. Sometimes I will use liquid tempera for a lot of different colors. But generally, if I'm going to give them a full palette of colors, I usually either use watercolor or tempera cakes. It's just a logistical thing. I used to use the plastic cans with the paints, but they got to be such a hassle to constantly be cleaning up. I was staying, an hour and a half after school, constantly just cleaning up paint cans. It just wasn't worth it. So I use just a paper plate and put really small amounts of the liquid tempera on there. I can always add more. That way I'm not wasting very much. And that's how I give the liquid tempera. With the different cakes, I have discovered, this is something I stole from another teacher, the tempera cakes work great in these little clear plastic cups. For whatever reason, when you buy these sets, they don't come with orange, but they come with brown. I don't know why they don't do it that way, but they. So I buy extra pucks of the orange, take the brown out. It tends to be the color that they use the least. I put the orange in, so I have my basics, and if they need brown, I just add it with their set that I put at their group in the cup. When I'm doing specific colors, like this week with my kindergartners, we're doing color mixing. We're taking primary colors and making secondary colors. I bought extra pucks of just the primary colors because I use them just by themselves a lot. And so I've got them and this. I put it on the tray because kindergartners use lots and lots of water. I love these water cups, spill-proof cups. Work really well for the kids. I use them with all of my age groups. I usually, especially with my older kids, will give like one water cup to every 2 kids. That usually works pretty well. When you have a lot of kids at one group, the one thing that can be an issue is the opening. It keeps it from spilling, but they'll all try to shove their brushes in at one time, and then they get the brushes jammed, and then you're having to go over there and try to dig brushes out because they get stuck. So I try to limit it to one for every 2 kids. And when I'm doing this project, I'll actually be doing this in the morning. With kindergarten, I give them the water cup, I give them 3 colors on a tray that goes in the middle of their group, and then we'll do our color mixing with our tempera cakes. And the big tray kind of minimizes how much water they put in here. Another thing that's kind of nice about using the cups is, especially with kindergartners, that do use so much water. I've given them this before and had the whole thing just swimming with water because they use so much. With these, if they have a lot of water in them, you just take it to the sink and you dump it out like that, and it drains all of that water out, and it's pretty easy to keep it clean. One of the big things I would say, if you're art on the cards, is to make sure you're cleaning up after yourself. For the classroom teacher, that's kind of like their house, and you're invading their space. And if you have a guest in your house that trashes your house and leaves, you're probably not going to want that person back in your house. So I try to be conscious of how the room was when I get in there. I try to leave it that way when I go. If I need to move the desks around to group them or whatever, I make sure we move our desks back. I make sure that it's cleaned up. I'm not leaving a big mess for them. You don't need to make enemies. Don't make enemies with the classroom teachers. Don't make enemies with the custodians. Don't make enemies with anybody. Your life will be much, much simpler that way. And I try to always be respectful of their space. And I have pretty good rapport with my teachers because of that, I think. So let's see. One of the things I do when I'm painting, I used to have the kids take their brushes down to the restrooms, wash the brushes in the sinks, wash their answer anything. It was bogging everything down. They were making a huge mess in the room. And half the time when we would get down there, it was in the middle of when another class was trying to take a restroom break, and it just became a complete mess. So I get just really cheap baby wipes, and I use those. I can get a great big box of them for about $11, and one box will last the school the whole year. Sometimes I even have some left over. So I just get one box for each school I go to that cleans up their hands, it cleans up their desks. It's pretty simple. And I told the kids they should only need to have one wet wipe. If they're needing to ask me for more, then they're probably doing something they should be doing. And those kids will have a visit with when they're going to get changed again after that. And that usually kind of takes care of that issue. One of the things that I have learned is that I tend to leave stuff in the classroom if I hang it up on their bulletin board or on their chalkboard. I just tend to walk off with it because I'm not conscious of the fact that I left it there. So I try to make sure I put my examples and so forth on my card here. And I did add this little tack strip. So if I have more stuff than a little bit here, I'll tack them there. Because I used to use their stuff all the time, and I was just constantly having to backtrack and figure out where I left things. If I do put things in their classroom, I will usually assign a kid going, you're in charge of reminding me that I left it there. And they always think that's really cool, and that kid will always make sure that they say, hey, because I just know I'm going to walk off without it. So some people don't have the issue, but I do. So I try to make sure that I just have it on my card. I don't have to worry about it. One of the things that I have done for myself to make my own life easier is each one of my cards I have a folder. It's just got the basics in it. I don't have any set sub-plans in here until I know when to need a set. But I've got the schedule in here. I've got a map that's in here so they know where the classrooms are. And one of the things that I started adding in here was the supplies and the locations of classrooms. I wrote down here where they keep their scissors. Some of the teachers let the kids have them in their desks. Some of them have them in caddies. Some of those caddies are easy to see. Some are inside closets or cabinets where they keep their watercolors and so forth. I've had instances in the past where I had a substitute. It was like middle of flu season, and the classroom teacher wound up having a sub too. And so it's a sub in with a sub, and nobody knows where anything is. And they spent half of their class time digging around the classroom trying to find where the scissors were. So this way they know exactly where they're at. And honestly, if I forget where the teacher put them, I can look on my own list and remind myself where they are. With going to 5 buildings and having 36 classrooms, I can't always remember where they stick up. So I have it written down so I can use it or my subcommittee too. Let's see, what else do I got? I do have, for each of my classes, class codes, art codes. And I tell the kids it's like an address. So whenever they're working on a project, I have them write their name on it, and I have them write their code so I know where the projects go. It's the school, the grade, and the teacher. So this is Eisenhower 4th grade, Miss Rhodes. And I just keep them on a ring. And I color code everything. It makes it a little bit easier for me to grab stuff right away. So all of my 4th grades are purple. All of my 6th grades are brown. 1st grade is green, and so forth. And I do the same thing for helper cards. On the very first day when I'm doing my intro, I give the kids a little 3x5 card, just whatever color their grade level is. I have them write their name on it, and I punch it and put it on a ring. And then anytime I need something picked up, passed out, anything like that, I got my helper cards, and then I know whose turn it is to help me. So then I don't hear any whining that they never got a chance to help, and this kid's gotten 3 chances to help. But the other nice thing about it is I can see what the name on the card, and they can't. So if that kid is being a little stinker and not making good choices, I just say another kid's name, and they don't know the difference. I will wash it out. Even if I've let the kids use the water cups and they say that they've gotten all the paint out of it, I always do it myself because there will always be paint left behind. So I get it in the pitcher. If it's a classroom that has sinks, some of our classrooms have the sink, some don't. I'll put some water in there right away, even if it's just soaking so it doesn't dry out. And then when I have time later on during a break or after school or lunchtime or whatever, then I can wash them and make sure that they're in pretty good shape. One of the things I will say as a traveling teacher, Velcro is your friend. This is my trolley. This is how I get my stuff from one building to another. Now, granted, I have 7 grade levels, so I've got a lot of stuff that I haul. If you have a smaller school, fewer grade levels, you probably don't need this much stuff. But all of this is Velcro. So it's falling off. I'm not needing to use bungee cords or anything because it's attached to each other. I attach the bottom of this to the lid that hooks into the bottom trolley. And then that lid is Velcro to the bottom of this. And everything's just stuck together. So I just wheel it and I don't have to worry about things sliding off, and I can carry way more stuff at one time than just one thing at a time. It goes a lot faster.
Where did you get your trolley at?
The trolley, basic trolley, you can get it at a school specialty, or there's a lot of different companies that have it. They have sometimes they call them trolleys, sometimes they call them something about files where you put different sized files in them. I like to get the legal size space because it's a little bit wider than the other. And it does have little sides that will come off. And I usually am just accidentally knocking into them, and it tends to collapse if you do not have those sides on. So I just tape the sides together so it stays put without me knocking into it. And then if for whatever reason I need to collapse it, I just cut the tape and pre-save it later on. But this and Velcroing it has made my life so much easier. I used to spend all this time trying to bungee cord everything, and it would still slip inside and it drove me crazy. I finally got smart and Velcroed it. As a traveling teacher, this is my brain. I've got all my lesson plans, everything that I need to keep track of, everything that I need to take with me, I've got in here. And it's got a zipper, so it'll seal up, and it's got a handy little handle here. I think I spent, now that this at Target a million years ago, I think it was like $15 at the time, which I thought was highway robbery. But I've had this thing for over 10 years, and it's still in good shape, so it was a great $50 to spend. But then I keep everything together, and I got a really bright color, so I could tell if I've left it behind. It doesn't blend into things. Like when I have things that are black, sometimes I don't notice that I've left it behind. This is nice and bright, so I always know I have it. Then I don't leave things around. Another hack that I learned as a traveling teacher. Out of the 5 schools, I have 3 different copy codes. Because some of the schools let us pick our own copier code, and 2 of them just assigned us one, whether I wanted to or not. And so I'm always getting confused of which code goes to what machine. I don't make that many copies, so then sometimes I just flat out forget. So I got a Sharpie, and on the back of my badge when I have to wear at school, I put my copy codes. And so whenever I'm standing there at the copier, I can just go like this and go, oh, okay. And I don't have to run back to where my card is and I have it written down because I always have it. So that goes, maybe that's how I like to get it. One of the things that I do with my kiddos, and I do it with my older kids too, but especially my younger kids, you will tell them, okay, I only want you to use crayons, and then you see them with markers out. You're like, they're not the same thing. So they do that a lot. So I did these little things, and they just have little magnets on the back. I can put those on my cart, like that. And then if I don't want them to use it, I put these on. And sometimes if I want them to use just my special supplies, like if we're using special crayons, like construction paper crayons, we're going to use foil pastels, I'll have all three of them out there. You're not supposed to use any of your supplies. And I started doing this just because I was driving myself crazy saying that all the time, but the kids have really picked up on it. And I will tell them that, and I put them up here. And I've had kids that start giving markers out, and the kid next to them go, hey, look, you're not supposed to use marker. So they've started policing each other because I put it on my cart, and so that's kind of been nice to do. One of the other things that I do with my cards, I do have little signs and stuff like this. I did this for primary colors, easy way to remember they're Superman colors. And so I have that up, and it's kind of a good reminder to the kids. I've got some other ones, like right now we're doing warm colors with first grade. And so I make this little warm color, I call him Roy, my fire guy, Roy, red, orange, yellow. And we have a picture of him in their sketchbooks that we use. I do have the copy center at our district education office make sketchbooks, put them together. I get all the pages together. I made different things, found different things, and put them together. And every summer I send out an order, and have a lady out there makes our booklets for us. And the very first day when we're going through basic procedures and that sort of thing, I pass out the sketchbooks. They write their name on it. They stay in the classroom. I ask for this much space in every classroom. Usually that's in a spot above the co-rec. I usually don't have anything there. But wherever they can give me a place, I ask the teacher what's going to work best for them. And then every kid has a sketchbook. For the Roy the Fire Guy, like I was talking about, we have been doing warm colors, and we printed with leaves today. And then once they were done, and I still needed to do some cleanup, once I got them kind of cleaned up, excuse me, so they didn't have a bunch of paint and stuff on their hands anymore, they went to their Roy page in their sketchbook, and then they think he's really super cool. And then we get out our red, orange, and yellow crayons, and they can color in the Roy the Fire Guy. And so the pages in here mainly relate to vocabulary that we talk about, different artists, like we do Picasso, so there's a Picasso page, there's a basic color wheel page, things that I know that we're going to cover through the year. I put those pages in. We've got one that's Superman primary colors, secondary colors. We do Matisse and talk about organic shapes. This is all first grade. So I try to put in pages that relate to the artists that we're going to talk about, the vocabulary that we're going to talk about. And so if they get done with the project early and they have extra time, other kids are finishing up, they can use these as a sponge activity. If like today, everybody was done printing. We only had about maybe 10 minutes left of class, not even that. And I still needed to do some cleanup myself. I had them get their sketchbooks, and then they worked in it for the remaining time. It's something that's pretty painless. They found the page that they were supposed to go to, and then it gave me a chance to get the rest of my printmaking stuff cleaned up. With fifth grade, we've been doing a project with their names and doing value and shading. We talk about positive and negative space. They do the letters of their name, and then they do different Zentangle designs in their negative space. And then we talk about how to shade those parts. So we're trying to show depth in our shading. And they tend to want to just do a plain old gray. And so one of the things I added to the sketchbook was a thing that's talking about value. And we just did the first part of it to begin with, because we were only using grayscale. So I had to get their sketchbook out and do just that part of it. So we practiced using a black colored pencil. And they got all those different values on their grayscale. So then we talk about, well, if you can do that here on this page, now you can do it on your project. So we're not just doing a flat gray, we're doing lots of different gradations of gray. So sometimes it's kind of a practice tool in our sketchbook too. With kindergarten, the very first day, I do it as kind of a diagnostic just to see where the kids are at. So we go through the basic shapes. We talk about which shape this is. That's a square. This is RED in it, red. Find your red crayon, hold it up high so I know you have it. We do the same thing with yellow, blue, so forth. And I can very, very quickly on the very first day of class know who knows their shapes, who knows their colors, who doesn't know about any of that stuff. So it's a really quick, really simple diagnostic on the first day of the sketchbook. So those come in easy.
Hey, Shannon.
What?
We're asking, people are asking if you could come closer. They can't see. They want to see your cool stuff.
Okay. Is that better?
I think so.
Okay, that's kindergarten with the page, the front cover of the book.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. 5th grade. There's the value, the grayscale. And later on, we'll be doing value with color. So later on in the year, so then we'll go back to this and we'll do the same thing, but a color scale. So sometimes we will revisit certain pages. With first grade, I don't want to admit how long it took me to figure out this hack, but it's awesome. We were printing our leaves today using our warm colors. And the way I do that, just real quick, paper plates. Usually 6 groups will do it. Actually, this time around, I only had 5 groups. I still did 6. So I had 2 that had red paint, tempera, 2 that had yellow, 2 that had orange. Then put 4 leaves of these little printers on there for each one. So there's 4 kids, so they can each grab one. They print their leaves, put it back on the plate. When everybody's done, I switch the plates. So these 2 groups, they had red. The red moves over to the 2 groups that had yellow. And that moves over to the 2 groups that had orange. And we just rotate out. So they get all 3 colors. But it's less mess, and I'm not having to do quite so many things. Once they're all done, I throw all of these in one of these big baggies. So they're all stuck in there together. Put just enough water in it to cover them. Seal it up. If I'm in a classroom, I'll use their sink to do that. If I don't, I'll try to have some water in my pitcher and just pour it in. If I have time, I'll start kind of cleaning them in the classroom. Otherwise, I just let them sit that way. And I even put them in my little supply bottle, so just in case it springs a leak, I don't wind up with water everywhere. But then what I do, when I seal it up.
That was me, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Once I have the water in there, I have a chance to clean it. I always make sure I put it in the sink just in case I spring a leak. But with the water in here, I just start jostling it around. And when the leaves are rubbing up against each other, they clean themselves. So I'm not sitting there scrubbing each individual one like I used to forever because I didn't figure this out. And that is how all of these came out. I just dumped them out and rinsed them off, and that's how clean they were. And it took me maybe 3 minutes to clean the whole bag. It is much easier than the old way. Just rub them up against each other and they clean them. You can do the same thing with brushes. national conference actually. You just lay them across down in the sink, and you just rub them up against each other like that, and they will rub the paint off of each other's handles. So then you don't have to sit there and scrub each paintbrush because they do it themselves. And it cuts your cleaning time in about half. Let's see. One thing I do a lot of is with PowerPoint. I got it okayed with our IT guy of scanning books, if I couldn't find a video or something of a book, rather than sitting there and reading like this or having them come to story time. Because then they start doing things to each other when they're in close proximity. As long as you own the book, this is what I was told by the IT guy, it is legal for you to scan it. Now, if I start giving a copy of all of that to everybody and their dog, that's illegal. But if I own the book, it's okay for me to scan it. And then I make a PowerPoint of the book so they can stay at their seats, it's projected nice and big, and they're not doing things to each other while we're reading the book. So I do that with books that I relate to with lessons and things. I do that all the time. Another thing that I started doing just a few years ago, I started doing review PowerPoints. Any of the material that we've talked about in the past, I include a slide or two of, hey, remember last time that I saw you, we did this project, or way back at the beginning of the year, we did this project. And if we were talking about vocabulary, any kind of like color mixing, anything like that, I go through some slides and talk about, hey, remember when we did those color birds and we used the primary colors to mix our secondary colors? How did we mix green? How did we mix purple? How did we mix the violet and then orange? And I'll say, what were the primary colors? What were the warm colors? Whatever there were. Since I've started doing that, I've had so much better retention from what I did before. It was really frustrating to me that by the end of the year, I would be talking about vocabulary that we had been talking about all year long, and I'd come back and review with the kids, and they couldn't remember any of it. And once I started doing the PowerPoints, and I do that right at the very beginning of something new, and it takes very little time, maybe 5 minutes, sometimes not even that much, just to really quickly review the projects that we've done throughout the year, any big vocabulary that I want them to remember, or any big concepts like that, the difference between visual texture and real texture, whatever. And the retention has been there, and they remember it so much better. And once I started doing that, I'm a believer, and I would never go back. It has really helped a great deal. I've noticed a really big difference of my students with that. Whenever I'm doing my PowerPoint, all of our classrooms have LCD projectors, so I just hook into their projector. One thing that we did fairly recently, I wish we'd done a long time ago. If I'd known how much easier my life would be, I would have done it a long time ago. We got our own wireless speakers, and I talked to the IT guys before we did it. I was just going to get some really small ones, and I said those aren't going to work very well, and we got a bigger one. This is about $70. But the volume is so much better with this. The whole classroom can hear it, whereas the smaller speakers, you just have a lot of issues with that. And so this goes around with me wherever I go, and it makes things a lot simpler. Let's see, what else I got on here? One of the things that I go through with my students at the very beginning, that first day when we're talking about stuff, and I stole this from another teacher, is this, how should my picture look? And I talk about, I want you to think about your picture like you ordered food at a restaurant. And I talk about how they're super hungry, they've ordered their favorite hamburger, and they just can't wait until it gets to their table, and they're waiting and smell the food and everything. And then they bring out this great big huge plate, and they put it in front of them, and all that they have on there is a little bitty piddly bun. And how disappointed they would be. Is that what you want? And that sort of thing. I said, well, when I give you a great big piece of paper and you draw this little itty bitty rinky dink picture, and you tell me I'm done, you just handed me a little piddly old bun. And we talk about how when you order that food, you want a nice big cheeseburger, and you want the good cheeseburger that's got the sesame seeds on it, and you don't want 3 little shriveled up burnt French fries. You want a great big old plate of French fries, and you didn't ask for a little tiny Dixie cup of water. You wanted a great big pop. So you want that whole plate so full of food. You go out there and go, oh, my tummy's full. So that's how I want your pictures to be. I want it to be like this, not like that. And the kids pick up on it really quickly. And I've had kids go, your plate's not very full, to another kid who doesn't have very much detail in their picture. So this has turned out pretty nicely for that. And I will refer to it from time to time, but that works out pretty well. Another thing that I've used for drawing purposes, we do have drawing racks that we can take around with us. This is another thing that's kind of nice. They're printing trays. They work especially well for little kids because they got that wall there. So if it's going to be kind of messy there, and it helps keep them from making such a mess on their desk. But the other thing that's nice about it, you can leave their papers in here and stack them. And there's just enough space that they're not going to attach to each other. And you can stick them on your card or in a corner of a room if you have that space, and just stack them everywhere. And it is a really nice kind of miniature drying rack. It works especially well for small papers that don't necessarily always work very well on drying racks. Little papers tend to kind of fall through. So these work really well for that. Let's see what else I have. Oh, one hack. This is something that I wish that I had come across earlier. Oh, let me see. The original one I found in a catalog by Wilco. It's called Perfect Portraits. And the kit wound up having a bunch of extra stuff that you might use, especially if you're doing middle school or high school. But for my purposes, I didn't really need a lot of the extra stuff. But it has the basic measurements for a face. They have this little thing that you are supposed to use to measure these lines. I wound up just adding these lines in because it made things a lot easier for my students. But you slide, I have my kids slide this under their project paper. We use a lighter weight paper for it so they can see the lines. I have them draw the oval. The other parts we don't draw in. But it helps them get proportions. And then I do it up in the front of the room just with a Visa bead marker because I laminated them. And we go through the basic steps of it. So they're still drawing all of the details themselves, but it helps them with proportions of it. And when I've had them draw these lines in, even when I tell them to draw it lightly, they draw it so dark that you can't erase them. So then they have lines all over the face. So it helps them get the proportions correct. It also takes some of the fear out of it a little bit because I call them cheaters. So then they think they're finding a little hack with it, and it kind of puts them at ease a little bit more when we're doing portraits because sometimes they kind of stress out about portraits. But you could make one of these yourself pretty easily, but it has made doing portrait projects with my students so much easier. One of the things that I do with my projects is I do a lot of step-by-step examples for a combination of reasons. First, it does help me because I can just put an example up in front of the class and it shows the step, and then I'm not stuck up here drawing something out or painting something in. I can be making the rounds in the classroom. The other thing that it's nice for is if I have to be gone, it's much, much easier for a sub to do something like this than for me to try to explain it. Let's say, for instance, this is a 4th grade project that we're doing. We've been doing their names. And we got our lines, our 12 spaces, because we're doing a color wheel. And then I painted each one of these in. So this is where the yellow goes, and it's right there. Yellow, green, green, so forth. And then I write the basic step and all the explanation on the back of which I do it in pencil, so it's kind of light, so you probably can't see it. But if I do have a sub, all they have to do is hold that up in front of the kids and then read directly off the page. It's kind of foolproof. Well, mostly. I mean, sometimes you have a sub that you're like, oh, dear Lord. But it makes things much easier for them to do. And I've had subs that once they found out I had this for them, they were willing to sub for me. They were great subs, but they didn't really have a lot of background in art, so they were a little bit intimidated. But once they found out that I had everything drawn out for them and they didn't have to be in front of the kids trying to draw it and then feeling foolish that they weren't doing a good job, then they were willing to sub for me. And it works really well for me, especially with these that are painting. If you're trying to paint this in front of the class with it up on the wall, the paint drips all over everywhere and makes a big old mess. With having all the steps done, I can just put it up, so I'm not making a mess with my paint, and I'm not stuck over here with my card working on the step. I can be going around and helping all of the little Jimmies and Susies and kind of keeping a track on what they're doing. And I do this with a lot of my different projects. Now, as far as drawing all these out, I don't show the kids these papers when they're all together like I'm showing you. You may notice that these papers are smaller than these. So I did the basic ones, drawing them out. But once I got it where it was the same thing over and over and I just needed to paint them, I used 11 by 17 paper and just photocopied them. They're a little bit smaller, but you can't really tell. The kids have no idea I did that. And then I didn't have to draw out 50 million different copies because I just copied them into the machine and then just painted them. And I've done that with quite a number of projects. I got a question. Okay. Let's see. Have anything else really useful in backup? I think I've got most of it. One thing I do with my liquid tempera, write the date if you got it on the tempera, and you can always see which is the old stuff, which is the new stuff, and you use up the old stuff so that it doesn't wind up being in the back of your cupboard and you lose track and then open it up and it smells like rotten egg. So that makes things much simpler. One of the things that I do with my kids is I have my quiet signal is show me the Mona Lisa. With as many classrooms as I have, 36 classes, there's no way I'm going to remember all the different quiet signals that all my teachers do. So I just have mine and it's down pat and the kids know it and it's no big thing. And then we practice it pretty easily. One last thing that I'll talk about, it works especially well for older kids like 5th and 6th grade, is doing what are called ketchup mustard days or ketchup mustard pickles. You give them a day that they can catch up. They must have it done by that day. And then if you have kids that are done early, you give them opportunities to pick things. That's where the ketchup mustard pickles goes into. So you give them a couple of different projects. They get started on one. Was there an independent practice? They can finish that up on their own. They know what to do. You can start them on a second project and get that going. So you have more than one thing going on. And then you give them a day where they can finish up things to catch up mustard kids. Any questions? Anybody?
I think you've covered an amazing amount of material, Shannon. I am in awe of your organizational skills, and so is Linda.
Bob has commented in meetings, I am very good at rambling about things, so,
All right, well, we'll leave it open. You can always check the comments for different questions. I'm sure that everyone love seeing that cart. I mean, that's just, wow.
This is actually a music cart. And I found it from the Winger Company, Wenger. They don't make this specific cart anymore, but they do have some really nice carts that are intended for music on a cart. But some of their things are awesome, and honestly, I think some of their carts are better than the art on a cart ones that are out there. And I just happened to stumble into it from a music teacher that showed me a catalog. But for whatever reason, they only sell it, in music supply catalogs. But they have all different kinds of carts.
Awesome. Well, I think we're going to close it out for the night, so I'm going to sign you off. So thank you so much for volunteering to do a mentor talk. And thank you for your assistance that nobody can see, Mariah, her partner in crime at Great Bend School Elementaries.
Hello. Yes, Mariah is my fabulous coworker, and she was kind enough to be my camera woman tonight, and I greatly appreciate that.
So thank you so much, and I'm signing you off, okay? All right. Thank you guys so much for joining us. That was an amazing talk. I do want to tell you real quick about some dates that you need to know for KAEA. First things first, conference is coming up, folks. It is 10th through the 12th up in Overland Park. But early bird registration ends the 29th. That's Sunday. Okay. After Sunday, registration goes up $10. Okay. Professional development grants, need to get those in soon. I forgot to write down the date, wrote down the reminder. And lastly, in October, at the end of October, we will have Natalie Brown from Derby. She will be talking about financial information, both ways to get money, I think, and from the survey that she ran a year ago on what the conditions or the money levels in different districts are. So thanks so much for joining us. Love your feedback on this new format, so please let me know, and have a good night.